1904 in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, Burris Frederick Skinner was born. His father was a lawyer and his mother a housewife. After high school, he attended Hamilton College and majored in English. He set off to be a writer at the time, even actively stirring up issues with his essays in the school newspaper. His father pressured him to find a job that made him a living, such as following in his footsteps as a lawyer, then pursuing his writing. After college, his father gave up in his pursuit of a legal partner and let him pursue writing for 2 years. According to Skinner, he, quote, read aimlessly, built model ships, played piano, listened to the newly invented radio, contributed to the humorous column of a local newspaper, but wrote almost nothing else and thought about seeing a psychiatrist. He felt that he wasn't accomplishing anything. By the end of the first year, he took a job and got a book published. It was a legal study titled A Digest of Decisions of the Anthracite Board of Conciliation, with a co-author from his father. After then taking 6 months of a New York lifestyle and then a European jaunt over the summer, he went on to Harvard in the fall and studied psychology. This interest arose from a childhood obsession with animal and human behavior. As a child and young adult, he used to build contraptions in order to help himself accomplish things easier, such as hang up his pajamas or blow smoke rings hygienically. College didn't propel much interest from him, though at a summer workshop he did write a one-act play on endocrine-inducing personality changes. He also claims that 2 particular graduate students in the psychology program helped in the furthered interests, Fred S. Keller and Charles K. Trueblood. In his years of research at Harvard during and after his PhD studies, he was inspired by John B. Watson's idea of behaviorism. This philosophy inspired a novel called Walden 2 and a bestseller called Beyond Freedom and Dignity. In Walden 2, the 2 veterans, Raj and Steve, ask Professor Burris if he knows about Fraser and his new society. Turns out that Burris went to graduate school with Fraser, and they get invited to tour the Utopia. The point of the Utopia is to study behavioral science. Fraser wants to see how society changes when people have a rejection of free will. It could have been considered a science fiction novel at the time of publication, since it featured the technique of applied behavior analysis prior to its existence. During this time, Skinner was able to refine the concept of operant conditioning and the law of effect. He also began to start work on his famous Skinner box. Nowadays, he is ranked as the most eminent psychologist of the 20th century by the American Psychological Association. When John B. Watson left the field of academic psychology in the 1920s, behaviorists started to look at other types of conditioning rather than classical. Thus came operant conditioning. B.F. Skinner is considered the one who invented this technique, but he based his work off of Thorndike's law of effect from 1898. Edward Thorndike concluded that an action is met with a pleasant response, it is more likely to repeat it, and vice versa. Skinner soon brought a new term into this field. The word reinforced explains that behavior that is good, with a good response towards something, will likely be repeated more, and bad, a poorly treated response, will likely not incur further demonstrations. There are 3 types of operants that Skinner identified. There were neutral operants, responses from the environment that neither increase nor decrease the probability of a behavior being repeated, reinforcers, responses from the environment that increase the probability of a behavior being repeated, and they are either positive or negative. And finally, punishers, responses from the environment that decrease the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. This last method weakens the behavior and is least effective. Positive reinforcement proved to be the most effective. When testing the reinforcement, there is the response rate, the rate at which the action is done, and the extinction rate, how soon the subject gives up. The quickest rate of extinction, though, is continuous reinforcement. Here are the definition of each type. A. Continuous reinforcement. An animal/human is positively reinforced every time a specific behavior occurs, e.g., every time a lever is pressed, a pellet is dispensed. Then the food delivery is shut off. The response rate is slow and the extinction rate is fast. B. Fixed ratio reinforcement. Behavior is reinforced only after the behavior occurs a specific number of times, e.g., one reinforcement is given after every so many correct responses, e.g., after every fifth response. For example, a child receives a star for every 5 words spelled correctly. The response rate is fast and the extinction rate is medium. C. Fixed interval reinforcement. One reinforcement is given after a fixed time interval, providing at least one correct response has been made. An example is being paid by the hour. Another example would be every 15 minutes, half hour, etc. A pellet is delivered, providing at least one lever press has been made. Then food delivery is shut off. The response rate is medium and the extinction rate is medium. D. Variable ratio reinforcement. Behavior is reinforced after an unpredictable number of times. For example, gambling or fishing. The response rate is fast and the extinction rate is slow, aka very hard to extinguish because of unpredictability. And finally, E. Variable interval reinforcement. Providing one correct response has been weighed, reinforcement is given after an unpredictable amount of time has passed, e.g., on average every 5 minutes. An example is a self-employed person being paid at unpredictable times. The response rate is fast and the extinction rate is slow. As a summary of the box's concept, behaviorism is more concerned with the observed behavior rather than the subconscious thoughts and emotions. Psychology is a science and needs to follow scientific research guidelines. The biggest influence on human behavior is nurture over nature. And finally, most animals, including humans, learn the same way. Behaviorism is considered among the most scientific sects of psychology. Once he moved on from Harvard to the University of Minnesota, Skinner tried to train pigeons as guides for the war, but the project got canceled. He did, in the end, end up teaching them to play ping pong. In 1943, after the birth of his second daughter, he created a new type of cradle called the baby tender. The box was clear, there were no slats on the sides, and it was heated, so no blankets were needed for the baby. In 1945, at Indiana University, he became the psychology department chair, but 2 years later he left to return to Harvard. He then became a professor and stayed for the rest of his career. As his children were growing up, he began to study teaching techniques and wrote The Technology of Teaching in 1968. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, he started to contemplate his behavioral ideas in the concept of society, including the book Beyond Freedom and Identity, published in 1971. He believed that humans had no free will or individuality. In his later life, life, he wrote about his past in autobiographies. He chronicled his life and works extensively, and kept actively keeping up with the field of psychology which he started, behavioral psychology. By 1989, Skinner had been diagnosed with leukemia and died at home on August 18, 1990, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Though lots of his ideas are now considered outdated, positive reinforcement is still widely used by everyone, and even in schools. His daughter, Julie S. Vargas, now runs the B.F. Skinner Foundation.